All right, Steve Palladino from Palladino Power Project, bringing another video on uh, the FRC and VO2 modeling chart that I reviewed in part one of this series. In this video, what I want to do is use the same chart, but I'm going to analyze a set of intervals that are designed to accumulate a fair amount of time in that 95 to 100% of VO2 max, or at least as we've discussed before, the surrogate for power at VO2 max. You got to put quotation marks on either side of power at VO2 max. Again, the background is the chart models FRC or the reserve work capacity and how that is depleted with efforts that are over FTP. This is power. The black line is power. The gold is exponentially weighted moving average, 25-second weighted of power. And you can see that FTP is marked here. When power exceeds FTP, then FRC, or the reserve work capacity, is being depleted, is being used for that power above FTP. So the chart models that depletion based on the person's FRC and their set FTP, their FTP setting that I give assigned to the athlete. FTP setting usually is very close or the same as the model in most cases. Assuming the model's optimized, then the setting should be the same as the model. The other thing the chart models is percent of power at VO2 max. Here, as I explained in the first video, we are using a surrogate, 5-minute modeled power, as a surrogate for quote unquote power at VO2 max. And the blue line essentially takes an exponentially weighted moving average of power, 25-second moving average, and converts that into the power relative to that 5-minute model, models or demonstrates percent of that power at VO2 max. Therefore, it should, because the exponentially weighted moving average of power models VO2 kinetics fairly well, it should model pretty close to the VO2 percent of VO2 max. Again, this is a model, as I said before. All models are wrong, but some are useful. This one I find useful. Other features of the chart are these horizontal lines right here, these dotted horizontal lines. The transverse line here represents 0 FRC, 0 kilojoules, but it also represents 100% of VO2 max modeling. The horizontal lines are 95% and 90%. So the workout that's prescribed for this athlete was 5 times 3 minutes with about 3 minutes and 30-second recovery. And the athlete executed at about 107 to 108% of FTP. So naturally, you're going to see decline in FRC, and then during the recovery periods, you see recovery. Decline during the work interval, recovery of that FRC or reconstitution of the FRC during recovery. So what I'm looking for here are two things, because we have two primary elements. I'm looking to see, did the intensity for 3-minute work intervals get me into that 95 to 100% range? I preferably want to get it as close to 100% as possible. And you can see that there are a few cases. This one here, you got to about 98% right there. You got to about 99%. Right here, you got to about 100%. Right there to 100%. And right there around 99%. So he was touching it. But if you look, he's just coming up and touching it, but not staying there very long. He accumulated 8 minutes and 13 seconds at greater than or equal to 95%. He did, and time at 100% was, marginal. So if you look at it in this context, we have 15 minutes of work intervals, and in this case, about 14 minutes of recovery intervals. We've got 29-minute work session, a 29-minute long work session in which the athlete was about 18 minutes and 13 seconds in that 95 to 100% of VO2 max range. That's pretty good. That's about 28% in terms of efficiency for that 29 minutes. About 28% of the time was spent greater than or equal to 95%. So that's one of the things I look for, is what's happening on the VO2 max. Am I getting to the target area or the stimulus that I want? The other thing I'm looking at is right here, is what's happening with FRC. Ideally, in a workout like this, you want to see the FRC sort of progressively get a little bit lower, and somewhere near the end, bottom out close to zero, somewhere down here. But what you can see in this set is that he never really got there, meaning I could have added another interval, maybe could have got there. That's questionable. Or I could have manipulated some of the variables. Now, what are the variables that we can manipulate in interval? Work intensity, work duration, recovery intensity, and recovery duration. Now, as I said, he was about 107, 108% of FTP here. He's down around 60 to 70% of FTP in these recoveries. And I already said that this is 3 minutes for the work interval duration, and these are about 3 minutes and 30. So those are our four variables that we can manipulate. I mentioned one other, is we could add intervals to the set, or we could, also manipulate the number of sets. But in this case, there's four primary measures that we could alter in this session, for this session right here. Is we can increase intensity. If we ask them to target a higher power, then we probably would have got a deeper reduction of FRC, maybe a little bit more time here at close to 100%, or certainly above 95% of VO2 max. So a higher work intensity might have done the trick. The other one, to me, and one that I like to manipulate with this type of workout, once I get an athlete, most commonly when I get them to 5 times 3 minute intervals, and we've dialed in the intensity, and we're getting good intensities that are providing a reasonable amount of time at greater than 95% of VO2 max and very close to 100%. Once we've dialed in the intensity and we've got to 5 times 3 minutes, then what I start looking at is dropping the recovery duration. I don't like messing around too much with the recovery interval intensity. I don't like to mess around with that. I like the athlete to recover sufficiently that they can complete the workout, achieve the workout. But that said, I will manipulate this subtly over time. So this was 5 times 3 minutes with 3 minutes and 30-second recoveries, just almost a 1-to-1, slightly, 1 to slightly over 1 work to recovery duration ratio. But like I said, I like to gradually cut this down. So once I've got the intensity right, and they're up to 5 times 3 minutes, I don't want to necessarily, add a whole lot of more training stress in terms of adding more TSS or RSS, but I do want to get more efficacy out of my interval session. So I start reducing recovery interval duration so that if you notice here, he's got all this time to recover. And if we cut that down, he's only recovering to here instead of up to here. So his starting point of the next interval is a little bit less recovered on the FRC side, which means he gets a little bit deeper. And then he recovers. So then what we see by sequentially lowering these recoveries over a period of weeks and months, we see that we get more of a stair step coming down, where each time we get a little bit closer to zero, a little bit closer to zero, a little bit closer to zero, and then finally at zero. And so that's what I like to do. Once I've got the work duration for these up in the 3-minute range, 5 times 3 minutes, and I got the intensity right that they're getting up into here, then I start cutting that interval duration, the recovery interval duration. I'm going to show you where this athlete is at now. This was back in January of 2019, and I'll show you where he's at now. If you were going to initiate this type of workout, the target that I usually use for most athletes as a starting point is try to get to 5 times 3 minutes at roughly 104 to 106% of FTP. And some athletes with higher FRC, I go higher. Maybe it's 106 to 108% is what I prescribe as the target. But as a starting point, I'm aiming to get to 5 times 3 minutes at 104 to 106%, usually with a 1-to-1 work ratio. In some athletes that are less adept at these high intensity intervals, I'll give them a little bit more, maybe a 3-minute to 4-minute work to recovery ratio, and then squeeze that recovery duration down a little bit, maybe play with the intensity a little bit. So there you have it on that interval set. Now let's go to more current. This is just recently, same athlete. I'm going to shift and get to here. And now here's the same 5 times 3 minutes. And the athlete this time executed these at closer to 106, 107%. The other one was 107 to 108%. But there's a couple things that you can see that are different here. Again, we look at FRC, and we also look at the percent of VO2 max, or Power Vo2 Max. And the other thing we can look at, just looking at this, you can see that 3-minute intervals, and you can see the duration is less than the work duration. He's down to 2-minute and 30-second recoveries. So 3-minute work at nearly the same intensity. Before it was 107, 108%. This is 106 to 107% of FTP, functional threshold power. But this time we have over time we've reduced that recovery duration. And now you can see this stair step. And right here, you can see up top, up here, as I scroll along, he gets to 0.06 kilojoules. So 99%, slightly over 99% of his reserve work capacity, his FRC, was used up in completing this workout. You can also see, if you remember, we would formerly in the previous example, he would get this type of pattern where he touched at Vo2 max. This one you can see we're getting up and hovering closer, spending a little bit more time there. So in this one, because of the recovery interval duration being cut, this is really only about 25 minutes. The other one was 29 minutes was the session duration. From the start of the first one to the end of the last one was 29 minutes in the previous example. This one's only about 25 minutes, and he accumulated more. He accumulated 10 minutes and 30 seconds at greater than or equal to 95% Vo2 max, even a little bit more time close at 100% of Vo2 max. And in this case, the efficiency, the time spent greater than or equal to 95% of Vo2 max was about 42%, where in the previous example, it was good, but it was 28%. So we got a lot more efficiency out of this, a lot more time spent at greater than or equal to 95% of Vo2 max. And by manipulating that duration, we have got him to the point where, he's essentially at the tap out point right here. There's no FRC left in the tank to draw upon. You'd have to extend the duration, maybe do another set, but again, we get into, do I really want to add all that TSS or RSS? We went to work, got what we wanted, and I don't really need to start tacking on at this point. Now, there may be a time when I want to change the stimulus, and I may have to change intensity or add another rep or add more work duration. I wouldn't necessarily add a whole another 3 minutes. I might make this 3:15, 3:15, 3:15, 3:15, 3:15. So we add 1 minute and 15 seconds to total work duration, not a whole nother rep, which is 3 minutes. Also, if I did 3 minutes and 15 seconds, then we're going to get a little bit more accumulated time for each interval because they've already worked everything down, gradually worked this up to where they're up over 95%, and now it's just adding another 15 seconds onto each one. Another thing to note in this one is notice how he executes this. Notice there's a fast get out. He's getting out hard on the interval, which lasts maybe 20 seconds. A 20-second get out. So what does that do? Well, what does it do? You're much higher over FTP. You're over the even initial target. It's sort of like putting money in the bank in that sense. Your average power is going to be higher to start with. But what it does mechanically to these elements is it drives FRC down quicker, and it increases the rate or makes the duration of time before the slow component, so to speak, it speeds up that slow component. It gets you into that 95 to 100% of Power Vo2 Max a lot quicker with this quick start. He's adept at that. I don't normally prescribe that to individuals. I give them just a constant power target, but he does this quite well, and it works effectively on those elements. And essentially, in the end, what it does is it buys some, seconds, a few seconds here and there, at greater than or equal to 95% of 100% of Vo2 Max. So there is an analysis of this type of interval session, what some people might call max aerobic power or a Vo2 Max Interval Session. I'll just call it 5 times 3 minutes with anywhere from 4 minutes down to even 2 minutes for some athletes recovery period for these interval sessions. Usually it's a 1-to-1, classically work to recovery ratio. So for every minute of work duration, you're doing a minute of recovery. And like I said, target initially is 104 to 106% of FTP. That can be modified based on the individual's power duration curve. It can be modified based on their response to prior training and analyzing on this particular chart, such that in some people I might drop it to 103 to 105, and some people I might increase it to 106 to 108, and some even on the elite side, into the 108 to 110, 111% of CP. So there you have it. That's part 2. It's just analyzing this one particular type of interval session, what I look for in terms of analyzing it on this chart, and how I use that information to change the workout prescription gradually over time. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time for part 3. Bye-bye.